Good morning, everybody. It is 10:15 a.m. on a Friday morning, this February 8th, in the year of our Lord, 2024, February 9th. We are here to talk about the Gypsy Rose case, all about everything that's going on. There is a small contingent of folks that have doubted her account of things. We're going to talk about why that is. We're going to talk about, in detail, the timeline from the date of her birth to the time she just got released on parole from December 28th. We're going to talk about her accounts of the murder of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. We're going to talk in depth about where she's going through now, what she went through in the past, prospects for the future. Is there prospects for a civil lawsuit against the doctors who failed to diagnose her as a Munchausen by proxy person? We're going to talk about all of that coming up next. Let's get started. Whatever you might be going through and wherever you might be, this is Omar Serrato with the Tilted Lawyer Podcast. I'm here to take your mind off of things. Yes, I'm an attorney. No, I'm not giving you legal advice. We're going to sit and talk like people, as these are the candid thoughts of one practicing attorney, and it's after hours. So have a seat. Feel free to have a drink and join me. Let's get started. Gypsy Rose. So last week I gave an introductory show on my candid thoughts about Gypsy, and I was without Ileana because of her sick child that she had to care for and tend to, and that's just the nature of newborns. And she was keeping her daughter safe and happy, and we talked about Gypsy. And what I had discussed on the show last week was that my thoughts were not yet fully formed about how I felt about all of the parties involved in this case. I talked about how I sympathized somewhat with her boyfriend, Nicholas Godejohn, and how it felt to me listening to the prison interviews and his account of things that he was severely manipulated by a vastly superior manipulator in Gypsy Rose, who was trained by the best, her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. She had spent all of her life with this lady who has learned to manipulate the system and gain the favor and sympathy of others as a result of her medical condition. And she went to school and she got straight A's, and she took this young man and got him to do her bidding. Was that the case? How much of this should we actually place on Nicholas? He was the one that actually committed the act. But had he never met Gypsy Rose, would he be in a similar position? I don't know. I have some thoughts on that, but I think that we need to go more in depth about Gypsy. So, Ileana, what do you think about all of that? There's this whole dynamic about Gypsy, the Munchausen by proxy victim at the hands of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, who is longing for some separation from her mom. She's longing for independence. She's coming of age as this adult woman that wants to break free. She doesn't want to be in a wheelchair anymore. She wants to have boyfriends. She wants to have friends. She doesn't want to be forced to do all these weird surgeries that she's doing. And she had been victimized from the day that she was born in 91 all the way up until now. And then she finds this young man, Nicholas Godejohn. She meets him on Facebook. They begin this online relationship for a long period of time, inevitably ending in the death of her mother, as they both came up with this plan over text message, and it's well documented. I don't know if you're going to be able to find the actual transcript of the text messages, but if you wanted to know what they were talking about leading up to the murders, it's out there. If you wanted to find it, there's a YouTube video that literally has frame by frame as they were being displayed in court what they were talking about. And so, but it paints a picture. Nicholas Godejohn was a 500-year-old vampire. And he was, Jekyll and Hyde. And the good part of him was this guy that was of moral character, that just wanted a family, the white picket fence, this very juvenile, idealized idea of what marriage was. And he was very much in love with Gypsy. But then he he was the one that said, hey, I got split personalities, and my name is Victor, and Victor is the doer of evil, and he gets me to do very bad things, and he's capable of killing. And he's talking about the depths of Victor. And together they concoct this plan to murder her mom. And then it goes down and it happens. Nicholas, prior to meeting Gypsy, had a criminal history. He had exposed himself in public. It wasn't a violent crime, but he was a sex offender, basically. He had violent tendencies. There were things that he was saying to Gypsy through text message and from Gypsy's account in person that caused her a severe pause at one point, wanting to break up. And then he says, hey, let's try it again. And so what are your thoughts on that whole dynamic between the two before we even get into any of this?
I can't really say that like he was completely manipulated by her. I think they fed off each other. Like he was giving her what she wanted or needed as far as like this fairy tale relationship. And he was getting that, I guess, submissive type of relationship from the other. And through that, I think they were not really thinking about what they were doing. I don't know.
Well, do you remember the whole BDSM thing that he introduced
Yes.
her into? And so submission was a
Exactly.
large part of it. And she was going to be submissive to him to do all of these sexual things. But that also extends in the BDSM community to other facets of life.
Exactly.
Extreme obedience in some cases. I don't know. Whenever I think of BDSM, I always think back to Pulp Fiction. That guy, you ever see that movie?
I haven't seen Pulp Fiction.
Ileana.
I know. It's just one of those
Seriously?
movies that...
Dominic, you're so fired. If I had known that you'd never seen that movie. Well, there's this scene. It's very graphic. It involves a sexual assault of another male on male. And they had in this closet this guy, they called him the Gimp. He was like in this body bag type of thing. And it was this weird BDSM thing. And it was like BDSM to the extreme. Like you're going to sit in this coffin until we call you. And it's bizarre. But when I think of BDSM, that was always my vision of it. Not my thing, but that's what I know of it. But he was into that.
Yes.
So let's talk about the timeline. So Gypsy, she's born in 91, July 27th, 1991. 91, at that time, I was 10 years old. And let me see, in 91, I think
I was 5.
the Twins won the World Series. Like gas was like $1 or something. But
$1.
it was something ridiculous, or like 80 cents. But she's born to Dee Dee and her father. And the strength of that, very quickly after marrying. But before Gypsy was born, I'm assuming while she was pregnant, they decided to get married. Ronald Blanchard, her dad. Now, Ronald was 17 years old. I have a 17-year-old. I couldn't even imagine her coming to me and say, hey, Dad, I want to get married. Like, no, the hell you're not. What do you mean? Getting married to who?
But at that time?
Well, at that time, they did things a little bit different. Back in 91, even going back, the story of my own grandmother. She met my grandfather when she was like 16 years old, and my grandfather was like 39 or something like that. And my grandma was telling me this story, many years ago, but as I'm replaying it in my head, about, oh yeah, I was working at the grocery store, and then I saw Grandpa come in, and he had these big arms, and he was so handsome, and then he was asking me out. I'm like, Grandma, you are a child.
Yes.
That is a crime.
But at that time, it was pretty normal.
It was normal. And my grandmother was born in Mexico. And so I believe the age of consent back then, and even now, is like 16 to get married anyway. And so they did. That was origin story. But never mind. He's 17 years old. He gets married to Dee Dee. He's not really feeling the marriage,
In love.
Yeah, he's not really all that in love with her. He's like, well, is this what I'm going to be living the rest of my life with? And, Dee Dee wasn't back then, grotesquely unattractive. I mean, she was a normal looking, I think she was 23. She told him she was 21.
Yes.
But still, the prospect of we're getting married now and I'm a dad and we're having a child and all right, so death do us part. It was a bit much. So they called it quits. It wasn't until about 1996, for the first 4 or 5 years, Gypsy's leading a relatively normal life. But in 96, that's the first time that Dee Dee claims that Gypsy had suffered from medical conditions that required her to walk, or not walk, but use a wheelchair. And that kind of going, and I told the whole story, and Dee Dee tells us, not Dee Dee, Gypsy tells a story about how she was riding a motorcycle with her grandfather. There was a minor accident. She scraped her knee and she said, "Oh no, you need a cast." Next thing you know, she shows up with a wheelchair, and then the family's like, "WTF? What are we doing?" Because she was out there jumping on the trampoline not too long ago, and now she's being paraded in a wheelchair. Well, that wheelchair, for the next 19 years of her life, would remain a fixture in Gypsy's life, and I don't have that much patience. I mean, I can't imagine. It bothers me to sit down for too long. I got to run around, walk the dog or something. But, and imagine as a young child, you want to go out, you want to run and you want to play. And she's already doing those kinds of things with all the little kids around her. And she's confined to this wheelchair. And Dee Dee's like, yeah, this is what we're doing now.
Crazy.
Gypsy goes along with it. But when you're 4 or 5 years old, there's no defense to that. There's none. So I talk about my kids an awful lot on the show. But my daughter, she's about to turn 5 in March. And I couldn't even imagine telling her, hey, you can't walk anymore. She'd be like, the hell I can.
Sprint running.
What's keeping me in the chair, guy? That's what she would tell me.
Not even if you try to probably, like, if you strap them, they'll just wiggle out of the chair. So
wiggle out of the chair. And when I put them, when they go to timeout, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, we have like this little guardrail on the stairs that locks the top stairs from the downstairs, and I put them on the other side of it so they're like in jail. But then even then, Olivia's like, she'll just, well, all right, I'm just gonna climb over.
Yeah, I can't imagine how. I mean, I don't know, because I don't think they go into details, but how did she get Gypsy to just stay still and in that wheelchair and not move? I mean, I know they mentioned that she was told not to get out of the chair, but
yeah. Well, I think that when you place the child in a cast, which is what Dee Dee did,
okay,
then it lends credence to the idea that, hey, there's something wrong with you. You need to sit in this chair to get better. And then when Dee Dee and Gypsy were alone, just themselves, not around people, she would get up and walk around.
Oh, yes.
And so she would, that would do a lot to kind of calm her anxieties, nerves, I'm assuming, to, I guess, dull any pushback from any of that. But when they were in public, that's when it was like, oh no, I can't walk. And then she told a story about how they're on the trampoline. And then as soon as she's jumping and having fun with all of her friends, and then as soon as mom pulls up, she flops down like a fish. And then Dee Dee just threw a fit. Don't you know that she's a cripple? And that's kind of how it went between the two of them. And when you're 5, there's not much defense to that.
No, of course.
When you put your foot down as a parent of a 5-year-old, there's no pushback to it. They push back against their mom. But when I use my dad voice, it's like, oh, okay. My wife will wrestle with them. Brush your teeth. You're going to brush your teeth. All right, I want you to brush your teeth. It'll be like 5 minutes of this. I'm like, Evelyn, right now. Okay.
I know. Even my dog responds better to my husband's voice than me. I know the effect.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what she was subjected in the course of. So the early 2000s, we start with the wheelchair. She's subjected to numerous surgeries. She's prescribed numerous medications in the early 2000s because Dee Dee is manipulating a variety of different medical professionals. There's some, let me just explain. There is a whole contingent of people out there that are attacking the medical claims of Gypsy and of Dee Dee And there's even some that are going so far as to say that Gypsy was not a Munchausen candidate. She was in on the fraud or whatever. I'm not going to get in on any of that because I disagree. We're not going to have evidence to corroborate that story as it is right now. What is undisputed is this. There was a feeding tube placed in her when she didn't need a feeding tube. She was subjected to multiple surgeries. She was purported to have MS. She never had MS. She was never diagnosed with MS. There was definitely a doctor or two that suspected that Munchausen by proxy was a thing because of symptoms that should have been there that weren't present because of Dee Dee's saying, oh, she has this, this, and that, and say, well, our tests are not showing that. And then there was even the doctor that had failed to report to a CPS what he suspected, but he basically said, he asked her to stand up, and depending on who you believe, there's multiple versions of the story. He asked Gypsy to stand up, and she does stand up, and Gypsy or Dee Dee flips out. Or the doctor asked Gypsy to stand up, and then Dee Dee flips out and just says, we're going to another doctor. Whichever account you believe, he clearly said that there is not a medical reason that I can give that would corroborate that this child can't walk. She should be able to walk. And then that's when they wanted to say, all right, let's do more neurological tests. Is there something neurological? And then he had suspected Munchausen, but he doesn't report it. That's a different story. We're going to get to that in a minute. But so all of these things are going on. Whether or not you believe the entire medical account that Gypsy says, or that has been pushed out by law enforcement, because there is a whole independent movement that is basically uncovering fraud that was going on within the doctors in this case with respect to prescription medications and all these other things. Okay. That said none of these things ever happened. This doesn't make sense because of that. I don't have time to get into that. We're not going to get into that. Just know that there is a group of people that disputes the medical information, but what's not disputed is that Dee Dee was 100% running a fraud on the doctors.
Yes.
Dee Dee was 100% instructing Gypsy to act in a certain way to corroborate what she was telling the doctors. And she was 100% prescribed medications and treatments that didn't fit any medical condition that she had, that 100% stunted her growth, caused the teeth in her head to rot out of her mouth. And there's even people that dispute that. It's like, well, the salivary gland thing, maybe it was just poor oral hygiene. I don't know. Nobody knows. I don't have definitive proof to that one way or the other. I personally buy the story that she was taking medication that caused her teeth to rot out. But just know there is competing theories. That's not what this show is going to be about. I'm really here to just talk about the human aspect of all of this. And so if you're going to attack me in the comments for that, I know it's coming. Just know, I know that it's coming. I know that you disagree with a lot of stuff she says. I know that. I really do. And I respect it. And I don't know all the answers. I know that there's one account and I know there's this other account. Which one is true? I don't know. I haven't been hired to advocate either way for the case. I'm just kind of going by the undisputed facts in hope to gain some kind of insight into the human condition by discussing this case. So fast forward to 2005. After Hurricane Katrina, Dee Dee and Gypsy, they're relocated to a special needs shelter in Covington, Louisiana. And this was brought about because Dee Dee had presented photos of their destroyed apartment and claimed that the flooding had ruined all of Gypsy's past medical records, which makes no sense because at what point were medical records digitized? I want to say like back in the 90s. Like even in the 80s, they had stuff like on microfiche that you would just pop in the little cartridge and the scroll wheel. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. And also the floppy disk, is it called?
Yeah, floppy disk.
Floppy disk.
Yeah. That was actually when I was in college, one of my jobs, I would create microfiche. It was the most boring thing ever. And
that's
I hate it. It was so monotonous. I did that for like a day and it's like, I quit. I can't even. So they get this. She tells this story right away. She lays the foundation, which she would tell doctors, whether or not it was true or not, she would tell doctors that all of Gypsy's medical records were destroyed by Hurricane Katrina. Whether or not anybody fact-checked that or not, whether or not anybody actually followed up with her lifelong pediatrician, in which Gypsy certainly had one, and he's still practicing today, I believe, in LA. I might be wrong on that, so don't quote me. But she would tell doctors that, yeah, we don't have medical records, but she was diagnosed with these things, and then she would get these treatments. What the detectives found when they were not researching, but when they were canvassing the crime scene when Dee Dee was, where she was murdered, is they found a cabinet full of medications.
Yes.
Right? In like perfect working order, like you would see at a pharmacy. They had everything, like breathing machines. They had whatever medication you could describe. They had cough lozenges in there and everything. It was a little pharmacy. But in there was a prescription book that Dee Dee stole from one of the doctors. So she's writing her own prescriptions. And so at some point she even needed to do the Katrina thing. She just, write them herself.
And I don't know if you mentioned it in the introduction podcast that you did last week, but if I'm not mistaken, she had been a nurse too at some point in her life, or she studied to be a nurse. So she had a little bit, she had a little bit of understanding of like medical terms and stuff like that. So she was good at convincing the doctors with medical terms of what Gypsy could maybe have, or suggesting like she might have this, and then that will open like the window to get, I don't know, treatment for or medicines for that specific condition.
I think I did mention that one of our very loyal listeners that actually commented on that video is an actual nurse.
Okay.
And she was kind of schooling me on like the history of this case and asking me to look into different things. But she was a nurse herself, and I think what she was saying was Dee Dee had like a very basic elementary, like you just said, knowledge of the medical jargon, and would know certain things to say or not say, or directions to point a doctor to get certain things done. Yeah, that was 100% a thing. So she used that. So while they were at the shelter, a doctor had suggested that they should be relocated to Springfield, Missouri. And at that point, they caught the media's attention when Habitat for Humanity got involved. I once did a thing for them way back, like in '98, for a church thing I was doing. They've been around for a long time.
Yes.
So it makes sense that, they would get involved with this. But they had volunteered to pay her bills they had installed a wheelchair ramp in their Springfield home. They were featured on these media outlets that were receiving all kinds of public sympathy. And you've seen the clips. Everybody's seen the clips now where Gypsy's kind of rolled out there and they're, big smile on her face. Cutest little kid. I mean, she's shaven, bald head because she allegedly had leukemia. Yeah. And Gypsy, this big smile, but they're getting the whole celebrity treatment, paparazzi and everything. And they had a trip to Disney World. They had received a specialized car for wheelchairs and gifts from the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So they were kind of a big deal back in 2005. And I want to say that I sort of kind of remember that. I also don't know if my memory's making it up just because I've been researching this case. But I've been aware of Gypsy Rose, I want to say, since she pled guilty to murder in 2015. We talked about it briefly, about some of her testimony that she gave for like maybe 10 minutes on a prior show we did maybe a year ago.
I'm pretty sure that I knew about the case. That was about 2 years after I finished law school. So I was pretty aware of what was like the big cases around that time. So I'm pretty sure that.
By the way, I just want you all to know that Ileana Clone Rosa, our Ileana, has been selected to be a super lawyer in the
Rising Star.
A rising star from super lawyers in the United States of America. It is very difficult to make that list, but for whatever she's doing, she's only been practicing for a short period of time. Was it 3 or 4 years now?
In California since 2020.
Yeah, so you are a litigatory baby.
Yes.
And she is a rising star currently on the list of super lawyers in the state of California. And so I wanted to give a congratulations to her. If any of you were wondering what kind of attorney Ileana is, well, she's a freaking super lawyer. How about that? But before I get off case.
Thank you.
We should make you dye your hair for that. Oh, and I think this is the first time that Ileana has ever joined us in drinking in the morning. It is 10 a.m. and we are fully drinking on a Friday morning. 100% weapon of choice this morning is Templeton Rye. Ileana is enjoying it with some Diet Coke, as is Dominic. I won't make too many comments on that, but I already made mine off camera. So I'm enjoying mine neat, as it should be. All right. So 2007. 2007 was the first time that there was any mention or suggestion that Munchausen by proxy was a thing with respect to Dee Dee and Gypsy. There was a pediatric neurologist, Bernardo Flasterstein, and he's the doctor that has been on all of these documentaries talking about, look, I should report her. I didn't report her. I didn't have proof. I didn't have to, I couldn't prove it.
That's the guy with the white hair, right?
Yeah, he's the older doctor.
Elderly doctor. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, white hair. He's got an accent of, I want to say it's a German accent, maybe.
Okay.
Flasterstein, it has to be.
Yes.
Yeah. Ileana, what is the legal standard for a medical professional to report anything related to child abuse?
It's mandatory.
To CPS. They're mandatory reporters in the state of California. I don't know if that's the case over there, but it's the case over here. But what's the standard? It's mandatory if you have a reasonable suspicion that abuse is afoot. You have to report it.
Yes. Some
doctors have refrained because CPS sometimes is a little over the top in how they litigate those cases. Flashback back to the Maya Kowalski case. Remember that one?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The one with the documentary with the
taking care of Maya?
Yes. Yes.
Mother that ended up committing suicide because the judge in the dependency case said, no, you cannot visit your daughter and give her a hug. Next day, she was hanging from the rafters of her garage. An ugly case. Sometimes CPS goes too far and sometimes they do nothing at all.
I was going to say just that. They go to extremes, either too much or too little.
An extremely frustrating agency to work with. But any lawyer knows it's the lawyer's job to prove what's going on. The doctors just have to raise the suspicion. And then we bring the doctors in and say, why were you suspicious? And then they present their evidence. And then the attorneys, along in the context of everything else, it's their job. It's our job to prove abuse one way or the other, or whatever they're alleging. This doctor said, well, I can't prove it, so I couldn't prove it. And if I reported them, then she was just going to have an excuse as to why. It's like, I'm sure she would, as would anybody in the history of humankind who has ever been accused of anything that they didn't want to be found guilty of. But his duty was to his patient, and he failed his patient. And one of the questions that I have been asking, as have a lot of other people that doubt Gypsy's story, why wouldn't she, now that she's out of prison, scream to the high heavens that I want a civil suit against all the doctors that didn't intervene when they could have done something about it back in 2005, 6, 7, all of these things, all of these surgeries that I was giving, all of these prescriptions that were being prescribed to me that I was taking, that was rotting the teeth out of my head. Why would she not go after them in civil litigation to recover awards for her obvious irreparable damage and, her pain and suffering, all of those things? Why wouldn't she? And my response to that is, maybe she should. And I'm pretty sure there's a statute of limitations. I don't know what the rules for tolling the statute are when you are in prison, but I imagine that she could defeat a statute of limitations claim should it be a thing or a defense or a valid defense in the case of these medical doctors. But I don't know either. She already knows the answer to that question. She's if I was going to bring a claim like that, it would have been like back in 2013 and I didn't. So I don't know.
Maybe she doesn't want to go through. I mean, she has had enough with her case. She doesn't want to go again.
That is the thing. Yeah.
I mean, it is a mental toll to have to go through the entire life that she went through just to prove what she needs to prove in one of those cases.
She's been a prisoner all of her life.
Yes.
The joy that she was able to touch when she was imprisoned by her mother was Disney fairy tales. She didn't have the most sophisticated of legal minds.
No, she didn't.
It wouldn't be top of mind to think, oh, I should sue. Even though her mom was kind of well versed in how to collect Social Security checks. She was 100% getting a Gypsy's Social Security checks. She was living off of her daughter, and
Exactly.
I'm going to get to that, but I'm getting far too off track. So Dr. Flasherstein, he noticed that even though Dee Dee had insisted that Gypsy had muscular dystrophy, that Gypsy's weaknesses were not characteristic of the disease. Her markers were not characteristic of somebody with MS. He said that there was a strong possibility of Munchausen by proxy, with maybe some unknown etiology to explain some of her symptoms, or some neurological reasoning, maybe her, whatever. He was medical stuff. And he doesn't report this to social services. Like we just said, he said that he had been told by other doctors to treat the pair with golden gloves. And I don't know what that means. Golden gloves is a boxing term.
Mm-hmm.
And doubted the authorities would believe him anyway, but you still raise the suspicion. That's all you're required to do, is to raise the suspicion. He failed her. If you're filing a lawsuit, Dr. Flasherstein would be, I feel like, target A, along with the hospital and all the other doctors, maybe her pediatrician that had referred Gypsy to Dr. Flasherstein. At any rate, friends started taking pain pills. Gypsy started taking pain pills after her extensive surgery. She was 15, but the craving for the pain pills had continued. And so not only is the Munchausen by proxy a thing, not only the false claims of muscular dystrophy and of leukemia and all of these other ailments, but because she's on all of these surgeries, she is high constantly from the time of whenever she started getting the surgeries, but at least 2007, on all of these pain pills. And she was taking some nasty ones. Suboxone, I think, was one. I think she was taking some Oxy. She was stealing some of her mom's pain pills. But that was her escape. That was her disconnect from her prison. From the age, at the very least, of 2007, that would have put her, 15, 16? Hey, drugs do something to a teenager's brain.
Oh, of course.
They do things to a child's brain. I don't know what doses, and a lot of these claims are from Gypsy herself. Some of it was claimed by the prosecutors and law enforcement. But if she's high all the time and, she's being fed Disney, a steady diet of Disney fairy tales, and she's constantly in surgery, she's in all these wheelchairs, the doctors are starting to get suspicious. What developmental harm you think when it might have befallen Gypsy as a result of all of that? I'm just so curious. Like, what was she? I know she is now.
Yes.
The way that she sounds, the way that she looks. She's put on a lot of weight. She looks healthy now.
Yes, she does.
But back then, she was like emaciated with the feeding tube and all of these things. How did it affect her development as a person? How did it affect her personality? Because those are things that are going to last into her adulthood, and we'll talk about some of that. She's married now.
Yes.
She's been out of prison for like a month.
And I think that's one of the effects of what she went through, like leaving jail and getting married right away.
I'm going to reserve my thoughts. I have things to say about her getting married. But Dr. John Fabian had mentioned in various interviews that one of her coping mechanisms in prison was drugs. She's taking drugs in prison. She was seeing other women get high, and look, drugs are prevalent in prison. She said she started off vaping. She said that, she was taking various things, but one of her coping mechanisms, which she learned in early childhood, was to make herself chemically high, and that's what she would do. She was borrowing money from her stepmom. She had recounted in one of her documentaries, the latest one, that she borrowed $50 from her stepmom because she said, I owe this money, whatever. It's because she owed money for drugs that she was taking while she was in prison. And then what Gypsy had described was, that was learned behavior from my mom, manipulating and lying to people. So she's fully acknowledging that she has these personality flaws. And that she herself is stating that I picked him up from my mom. What was her mom a master at? Manipulating and gaining sympathy for her daughter and herself. If you listen to the prison interrogations, when she was arrested and she's talking to law enforcement, she puts on the full-on production.
Oh, yes.
The full-on production. And what was most telling for me is like, there's this point where she's saying, oh, I was raped and I was all of these things and he wanted to kill my mom and I'm the victim and all this stuff. At first thing, she didn't even acknowledge that her mom was dead. She acted like, she's dead? Really? And then the waterworks, right? And then she's trying to deflect blame. And then law enforcement just kind of says, look, we know that you were involved in this. We got your cell phone records. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to tell the whole truth now. And she kind of spills the beans. I halfway think that she expected that she was going to walk out of there because
she did. She said so in the documentary that she thought that she was going to be able to walk out.
You're right. I do remember that.
She was so naive that she thought that she was going to be able to do that.
But she, all of her life, she's been seen as this victim and praised, and nobody has ever put her to the grinding stone to test her character, to test her personality or whatever, other than her mom, right? And so, yeah, I guess that makes sense that she would think that. In 2009, the police received an anonymous call expressing doubts regarding Gypsy Rose's health. And in September of 2008, Gypsy's pediatrician, her nurse, goes to her with 3 separate documents. Or her pediatrician discovers, he was on the documentary talking about when he discovered that there was like 3 different birth dates for Gypsy.
Oh, yes, the years.
Yeah, his nurse.
91, 95, and some other one.
Yeah, 91, 93, 95.
Yes.
And then like the way that he's describing it, he says that I'm physically affected right now. Like he's going through like this physical reaction because he had, I don't know. But he says he called DFS. He says that I'm concerned that this child has been kidnapped. He didn't say Munchausen. He said, I think this kid has been kidnapped. And he's saying that they called Dee Dee. They grill her about the birth certificate. Nobody ever follows up on it. He says, I asked Dee Dee to bring Gypsy in. I told her that I was the one that called Department of Family Services on her. And then asked her to leave the room because I wanted to talk to Gypsy at this point. And then he asked her if she's okay. And then Gypsy's like, yeah, no, I'm fine. And are you sure? And he says, no, everything's fine. And he says, my concerns were not assuaged. But I felt I had done everything I could do, which I guess, I mean.
That's the most he could do.
It's weird to me, though, that he would not have just said, is this a Munchausen case? Should we look deeper into her medical records? And I don't want to be that guy that plays Monday morning quarterback and that says like, well, he should have just known. Wouldn't it have been obvious? I mean, yeah, let's look at all of the possible things it could be. It could be like like 28 different neurological things that are going on, psychological explanations as to what's going on. One of them may be Munchausen, but Gypsy reports and appears to be fine and all of this stuff. And other than the 3 birth dates, I don't really see much reason to doubt what's going on. And so he just did what I could do. Gypsy says, well, Gypsy was in prison during an interview. She says, well, how do you know that the doctors aren't just saying this stuff to cover their ass? Which leads me to believe that she's 100% had thoughts of civil litigation against the doctors because she does not even believe that the doctors are being truthful here. And then in the latest Gypsy documentary, this doctor was being, well, I wish her the best and I'm sorry that I failed her. He seemed genuinely remorseful. And I felt bad for him. But you know what? Reporting her to DFS should have prompted all of the investigations that I just described. All he had to do really was alert. I mean, to ask him to be like detective number 1 on the case and you have to just, find out all these things that are going on is a little unfair. He wasn't the only doctor that was involved.
There were many.
We still have Dr. Flasterstein, and this was after Flasterstein had already suspected Munchausen was a thing back then. So that is what it is. After the visit, Dee Dee becomes paranoid. Way more paranoid. Imagine all of her life, she knows for a fact that she's defrauding everybody. She knows Gypsy was not born in 1995. She knows that the train of checks from the SSI is going to stop. And what's more, I believe that Dee Dee, look at her life. Look at what she's gone through. From her family accounts, she was this person that was doted on by her mom. More so than any of the other kids. All the other kids, it was normal. But mom was attached. Dee Dee was attached to the hip to her mom. That was her main source of love and affection. She meets this guy, Ron, and she gets pregnant by him. They get married and Ron rejects her. And Gypsy really just said, hey, I'm too young for this. Her only friend in the world, the only relationship that she's ever cultivated, because she's kept everybody on the periphery, the only relationship she's ever cultivated was Gypsy. And now you got DFS showing up to her door on the verge of exposing the fraud that has gone on for years. And so, of course, paranoia.
Of course, yes.
She blacks out the windows, remember? She tightens the reins on Gypsy even more than they already were. And at this point in 2009, Gypsy is like 17 years old. She is a young woman that is on the verge of adulthood. And in spite of wanting to keep her locked up as a child in mind and in thought, there are other chemical processes taking part in her adult body that give her very adult urges and needs that she needs fulfilled. And so she's reaching out because her mom is not enough. Her whole world can't just be Disney and Dee Dee. And so in 2010, all of this needs bubbling up for Gypsy, this need to escape, this need to be normal. I'm not this 5-year-old little kid anymore, whatever. She finds the Medicaid card, realizes that, hey, I was not born in 95. I'm actually like 18 years old. And the way that you hear Gypsy describe it, she's emboldened. She confronts Dee Dee. And then they tell a story about how they go into like the Staples, and then
Yes.
Gypsy is sitting there, and then Dee Dee comes back with this doctored birth certificate and says, see, do you believe me now? So even then, even though the lie has kind of been exposed, Dee Dee's still trying to kind of play it up and gaslight Gypsy into thinking, no, I was right all along. Never mind all of the parental alienation that's going on, because, you know, her dad,
The father, yes.
he's not much of a fighter, and he didn't really fight for Gypsy in this case. I'm not saying he did anything all that crazy. I'm just saying that I've seen dads fight harder.
No, he just sat back, relaxed, focused on his life. That was with this, I guess, the stepmother now. And he just, from what I could tell, he seemed confident that Gypsy was taken care of, and that
Yeah, satisfying.
they didn't need him, and he was sending some money here and there, and it was okay. Like,
And he had a new wife.
yeah, and there's a lot of fathers like that, so it's just
It was like this. It was like, hey, I want to see I want to see Gypsy. And Dee Dee chimes in, you're a piece of shit. You never did this and that. You know what? I'm good with all that.
exactly.
I will write a check.
Mhm.
I will keep in phone contact with Gypsy. I will do, there's some people don't have the energy to fight with all of that.
And we don't know, because I don't think they go into the details
don't.
of the relationship. Who knows what Dee Dee was asking or doing or saying to him?
But you've been
That-
practicing. Okay, so you've been practicing for 4 years, right? You've seen these cases. I've been practicing for 10
yes.
years. You could kind of just fill out the pleadings already.
Oh, yes.
Mom is acting as the gatekeeper to the minor child, Gypsy Rose. Every time father tries to make an attempt to be a part of the Gypsy's life, Dee Dee shuts it down and insults him and hurls all of these accusations of that he's a deadbeat dad. He doesn't pay child support. He doesn't do enough. I'm the one doing this and that, and you don't even do these things. And he's constantly insulting his intelligence and going back to these emotional attacks. And all dad wants to do is be a part of Gypsy's life. And he's blocked at every turn by Dee Dee Blanchard.
Yes.
Those are the pleadings. I don't know if that's true or not, but I guarantee you, if I were to represent Ron in this case, that would kind of be the framework of the pleadings that we would write, and we would have all of this evidence based on text messages and phone calls and all those things. I don't know. What do you think?
It wouldn't also surprise me that she wasn't over him, and there was a lot of, because from what I saw in the documentary, he started dating who's Gypsy's stepmother now when Gypsy was, I think, 3 or 4 months old.
A much younger and attractive woman.
Yes. So,
and she was very clearly aware of that.
Yes. I mean, and just knowing about Dee Dee and how she was with Gypsy and her family, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a lot of a drama involved about his new relationship, and that maybe drove him even farther apart. I mean,
yeah, it is. Gosh, it is so hard for dads when you're dealing with a parent like that. I mean, when I get those clients in my office, I'm like, listen, I'm not going to go in there and why don't you want dad to have, what do you mean you want to put dad on supervised visits? What did he do? What's the safety concern?
Exactly.
Well, he doesn't know how to change diapers. The instructions are on the box, young lady.
They can learn.
Yeah, it's not that you want them to take a parenting class, because the reality is your child deserves to have her father in her life just as much as her mother. Mm-hmm. She needs both. I understand. I've had these very candid talks that I understand that you feel like he failed you in the relationship and that he's left you high and dry. But hey, we're not playing that game anymore. This is the co-parenting game. Co-parenting requires a great deal of maturity, a great deal of forgiveness, and a great deal of selflessness, none of which are the features of a narcissistic person that is prone to victimize their child with things like Munchausen by proxy, things like inserting a feeding tube into their body to control the nutrients. That is nuts.
That was like one of the biggest. I mean, from all of the surgeries, that was the one that I was like,
that's the one that pissed me off the most, honestly, the feeding tube, because it's like, come on, man, I need my meat and potatoes or something. I need to grow. The child needs to grow. The child is tiny. Dee Dee is, I don't know how tall Dee Dee is, but Gypsy, when she was a child, was tiny. I mean, she looks like a normal woman now. Yes. She's filled out great because off of prison food nonetheless. But she
doesn't seem to be like more than 5'2" or something like that.
That's what I would guess. Yeah. That's what I would guess, about 5'2". I don't know. So, VisionCon 2011, the sci-fi convention. She meets a guy named Dan at this VisionCon convention. Sci-fi, that she was into these things. She would dress up in costumes, and it was the thing that she would do. It was one of her outlets into the outside world. She meets Dan, and they would talk about common interests. They would friend each other on Facebook. They would talk about sci-fi stuff. They would talk about sex. Their conversations would get sexual. She said, I thought it was a possibility that he was my knight in shining armor. Everything to her is knight in shining armor.
Very true.
I'm a damsel in distress. That's her only framework of reference. And then after a while, they've been talking. She says that he told me he was on parole. I don't even know what parole was. And this is around the time that she found out that she was really 19 years old. I don't know. And one of the things I said on the last show was, I don't know if he thought that she was 15 or not, and it was like a pedo, or if like he just, all right, well, she's 19. I guess she's of age, and so fair game. But she was relieved to be able to confide into somebody. She started dreaming about what it would be like if she was just a little bit older, and maybe she could be more relatable to him at being a 35-year-old man. She had talked about the Medicaid card. She wanted to stand up for herself. She realized at this point, she said, at this point, I realized that the wheelchair that my mom wanted me to sit in was a con. She started to become privy to all of the fraud that Dee Dee has perpetrated on the medical community and how she's manipulated the public and all of these things. Dee Dee was 100% receiving the SSI benefits from Gypsy. Dee Dee's source of income was Gypsy. And so she had a fundamental interest in preserving the lie. But now it's all starting to boil to the surface. And Gypsy is asking questions. And that was the one person that she can control in the past. But you're not going to control a 19-year-old that wants to have a boyfriend that way.
No.
It's not happening. It's the whole Catholic schoolgirl thing. You could keep them, chained up if you want to, but they're going to sneak out at night. I hate the fact that I have daughters,
It's not easy.
Oh, all daughters, all of them. It's like, Jesus, I couldn't even get like a little enforcer, to like, oh.
But you have the male dog, right?
What's the dog going to do, man?
A little bit of emotional support.
Even the male dogs in my house, like have like this feminine energy about them. It's like, oh, I was telling my wife the other day, there's way too much feminine energy in this house. Like, what is the deal? Because like my wife was getting all, oh, I'm feeling emotional. I want you to hold me. I want you to, I want you to tell me that you love me and all these things. And then Evelyn was doing the same thing.
Oh.
And it's like, you guys can't both be on your menstrual at the same time.
Poor thing.
Oh.
Well, my husband feels the same, but hey.
I sympathize with your husband. Hey, it's...
And the dog is a female, so...
Hey, there you go.
He has a son, but because he doesn't live with us, he gets maybe like a couple of months with someone to share all the testosterone, and I go crazy those months because all I hear is them screaming and jumping and running and throwing the ball and playing video games, and it's like I need to get into my room and be like, okay, put on my music because it's just way too much. But at the same time, just a couple of months from an entire year, I'm good with that. But I'm used to, I understand because I'm used to, I guess, the feminine energy in the house.
Oh, so much.
And it's so different.
I take it out on Dominic. Say, hey, Dominic, you want some whiskey? You want to put some Diet Coke on it? You want me to put a little umbrella in your cup too? Oh, among other things that I say, but all right. Getting back to this.
Yes.
So now Dee Dee is aware that she's met this guy named Dan. And then she tells Gypsy that, she can leave. Or he's telling Gypsy that she can leave.
Yes, he tells her like, hey,
I'll protect you. Mm-hmm. I'll take care of you. And then the plan was that she was going to leave and live with him at his home. They were going to move to his farm up in Arkansas. And then she makes her first attempt to run away.
Oh, she runs away.
She did. Yeah. For the very first time. I mean, she got away. So when her mom was sleeping, she steals her mom's cell phone. And she texts him. She says they're about to run away together, right? She packs a few costumes because she didn't have any real clothes. Costumes, her Disney costumes, Jesus. There was this whole confrontation between her and Dee Dee where she says that, I know that I'm 19. She says, I try to stand up for myself. She said, I try to talk to her, and then that was the whole Staples thing, right? But when she's running away, she leaves through the back door. It was late at night. It was about 2 a.m. She hitchhiked to a friend's home, which is a I don't know how to reconcile that. Hitchhiking is not really a thing in 23, let alone, well, maybe it was back in 2011. I don't know. That's kind of scary. Okay, let's just buy the story. She hitchhikes to a friend's house. And then he tells me that he's on parole and he can't leave the state. We're not going to Arkansas. We're staying right here. And then my first reaction is like, oh shit, she's going to find me. And so around 4 a.m., her mom wakes up. She knew that she wasn't there. She found her cell phone, I guess. She steals her mom, but maybe didn't have texting capability. I don't know. But she sees the messages back and forth between her and Dan from the convention. And then she goes out looking for her. Around 8 a.m., she shows up to Dan's place where they're already sitting. And then she arrives at the door. Her and Dan were sleeping. She sees her walk into the door. She sits up, and the first thing she tells her is, I know that I'm 19. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. She's trying to do that whole thing. All right. And then she asked, where's my pills? She's talking about her pain pills, her medication pills, basically insinuating that I'm going to call the cops. You have stolen from me. I'm going to call the cops. They're going to arrest you, and all this extreme manipulation, right?
Yes.
At this point, I give her the pills. She says she gives her the pills back. Then she asks, where's my money? And I gave her the money back. It was like $1,000 that she stole. And she says that they had this conversation on the porch, and then Dee Dee's telling her, if you come back with me, I will let you see Dan. You can have a relationship. It'll be fine. And at this point, Gypsy is 100% completely dependent on Dee Dee. She has no lifeline outside of Dee Dee. I mean, I guess her dad, but she has never
Strange.
thought to. Yeah. But she says, all right. On the way back, I'm confronting her about my age. And this is Dee Dee, or Gypsy talking about Dee Dee. She tries to confront me. Otherwise, she stops at the Staples. She has a copy of her birth certificate. She manipulated to say it was 1995, probably used whiteout or something, a copy machine. She says, there's your actual birth certificate. Now do you believe me? And I did believe her, and I still loved her. There's been a lot of people that have chimed in and have suggested that perhaps Gypsy had a form of Stockholm syndrome, which is
suggested in the one of the documentaries.
The latest one, Prison
Yes.
Confessions.
It makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I don't know if it's Stockholm syndrome as much as it was. That's her mom. She's lived there all of her life. I mean, I guess there's probably tie-ins, but yeah. And so she's very easily manipulated by Dee Dee. Not only that, she loves her. That's her mom. And if you hear her talk about even to the point where the day of the murder and the things in her heart of hearts, she didn't want her mom to die. She just wanted to be free. She just didn't know a better way. What's the only way that Sleeping Beauty got free? Well, they slayed the dragon. What's the only way that Thumbelina, not Thumbelina. What's that? Tangled. What's the Tangled movie? The girl with the hair.
With the long hair?
Yeah. The only way that she got free was by poisoning her mom, or her mom didn't get her life essence or whatever.
I have seen too many princess movies because I
I've
don't
seen
remember.
them all.
I don't remember any of that. I remember Snow White and Cinderella, and that's pretty much it.
Oh, I've seen them all. But the common trait in all of those, the stepmother, they all get their comeuppance. The Wicked Witch in Snow White is murdered viciously. That's how she's going to gain her freedom. That's how she forms this plan. So at any rate, she gets back home. And at this point, now let's visit the mindset of Dee Dee. She's been visited by DFS. The medical professionals are suspicious of her. Gypsy is asking questions. Her paranoia is through the roof. She's already blacked out the windows. She's already attempting unsuccessfully to limit the contact of Gypsy to the outside world. So now what does she do? If you hear Gypsy describe it, she's chained to the bed. Yes. She thrashed her computer and her cell phone, just destroyed it. She was chained for 2 weeks with handcuffs and a dog leash. Chained to who? Well, to her mom.
Yes, exactly. Dog leash to her mom, and I guess the handcuffs to the bed. Something like that.
Some variation,
yes.
or both. It would be weird. Still, whenever she would move, her mom would know. She was at Dee Dee's mercy for everything, to go to the restroom, for food, for water, for sustenance, for going out in the sun and getting some vitamin D, whatever it was. As punishment, she wouldn't feed me for some days, and then she would eat whatever she wants, which is unbelievably cruel. That would piss me off. I was like, no, not even. You're giving me some fries. The hell with that. We're going to fight. But even then, Gypsy is like 80 pounds. And her mom was a heavy-set woman at that point. She's probably pushing 180. I'm guessing from her pictures. It doesn't matter, but she probably had 100 pounds on Gypsy. There was no fighting. There was no wrestling. All these thoughts that I have, instinct, is not working out for Gypsy in the same way. As punishment, so Dee Dee knew that Gypsy was afraid of her, and she played up on that. There was never an indication for Gypsy that there was ever going to be an end to this way of life. Her best attempt to escape thwarted.
Mm-hmm.
And there were repercussions. No more computer. You don't get a cell phone. And now you're sitting here on a dog leash. Could you imagine?
Without food, well, limited food and everything being controlled. She was a prisoner, so it's. I don't care if it was her mother. She was a prisoner.
The abuse didn't stop there. If you believe Gypsy's account, Dee Dee had never physically laid a hand on Gypsy until about that point. And then after she had met Dan, and when she gets her back to the house, anytime that she was displeased by anything that Gypsy had done, there was a beating in tow. She would hit me, she says, with coat hangers, hands. She would punch my leg in the thigh, give her a Charlie horse. My dad used to do that. I was like, hey, who won the race? Charlie! Boom. It's like, oh, that was really, he was joking around when he would do that. Nowadays, they would call that child abuse. So for 2 weeks, she's trying to gain more of Dee Dee's trust because she doesn't want to be on a leash anymore. There's lots of begging. After the 2 weeks of being chained, this is the most bizarre point of the story that I believe has probably psychologically affected Gypsy the most. Dee Dee puts a full-on voodoo spell on Gypsy. You recall that story?
Yes, I do.
She goes and buys from the supermarket a cow's tongue. She had a picture of Dan. She had a picture of Gypsy. She puts it in a mason jar. And I think she lit it on fire or something like that. Or
She put it under,
am I making up the fire thing? Am I wrong on that?
I believe. I think they mentioned something about fire, and then they dig a
No.
hole.
It was worse than that. It was, they put the tongue in the jar and some of Gypsy's menstrual blood.
Yes, that.
Buried it in the
Buried,
backyard,
yes.
and then said, her mom is telling 19-year-old Gypsy, you will never find love. And then you're never going to be happy. You're never going to find love. And then she's going into this whole account where everybody that I get close to leaves me. She's talking about her ex in prison. It's like, I mean, so much for her to learn. This is adult Gypsy now, apart from her mom and all of these things. But I guarantee you, has affected her psychologically.
I'm pretty sure, and they are from Louisiana, where that is like the voodoo. It's very, I guess, prevalent and big. So I don't know how much she knows or she believes about that, but
Well, her family talks about Dee Dee. They said that she had a wizard tattooed on her leg or something.
yes,
That she would play with magic. That she would play with a Ouija board.
yes,
It was like, they described it like the scene out of Carrie, that old horror movie from like 19...
yes. I know which one you're talking about.
Dominic, when was that movie made? Like 1977?
Carrie, yeah.
He was not even a thing. Dominic was not. It was in the
not born.
70s. It was, yeah.
It was before I was born too, but I remember watching that movie.
Oh,
I was obsessed with 70s movies for a while, and that's one of the ones that I watched.
70s movies are intense, man.
Yes.
If you get in on 70s movies and you catch a wave like that, there's a whole string of movies that is like must watch cinema. You have to watch it. Carrie's one of them. They're all gonna laugh at you is one of that scene with the mom at the very end. I remember thinking as a little boy, I was like, what is she doing? And she has like the cross, and like they had all of these weird, bizarre religious tropes in 70s movies. I mean, The Exorcist kind of started all of that. And then from The Exorcist, you got The Omen and all of these other movies. Carrie came about, and people were obsessed with religious dogma, ideology, artifacts, visuals. Carrie's, that one scene at the end where her mom like catches on fire. It's like, I remember watching that like on Channel 13. And it would come on TV. It's like, wow. That movie was terrifying. That image of her covered in blood, Carrie covered in blood.
Like the
John Travolta and those guys. Oh, we're getting off topic.
Yes.
All right. So
yes, going back, I guess she believes maybe that affected her in some way.
She believes it, but I believe it on the way that she has behaved in every relationship since. And we're going to talk about that at the end. We've already been going for an hour. I don't know if we're going to split this in a couple of episodes or not. It looks like we probably are, but we still got to get to I got to speed this up. Okay. So